Noting the hour and the presence of a quorum, I call this Finance Committee meeting to order. Assuming none of the audience members have citizens' concerns, we will move on to the next agenda item, which is a presentation on the override mechanics.
Okay, thank you. Assuming people will watch this on video, I will go through this, but not in a ton of detail, because the point of our development of this document was that it should provide all of the information. If I can get it to actually advance, that would actually be super nice. Now it's going to advance like by 4. I'm going to go back. So the point of this document was community outreach, which we learned we couldn't do exactly how we originally thought, but we're going to cover revenue sources, the budgets A and B, the budget drivers, the impact, the override, and property tax impact. And then in the appendix, there's tax bill breakdown for those who would like a little primer on how your tax bill is made up, and then the free cash and Minuteman budget. So this is an example of our revenue. These are the different buckets that are used to pay all our bills. This is from the ALG spreadsheet for FY25, given the B budget dollars. The B budget being, should we not pass an override, and are operating on our regular 2.5 plus new growth revenue stream. So these are the parts of that revenue pie chart that make up our operating budget. The tax levy obviously being the biggest, and then state aid, local receipts, and town reserves. State aid and local receipts described in the boxes as unrestricted government aid, veterans benefits, elderly exemptions, state-owned land, public library offsets. And then local receipts, excise taxes, permits and fees, investment income, things like that. Revenue that's not used in our operating budget is excluded debt and CPA. They are used specifically for their own set of programs. Excluded debt to pay our debt payments for debt exclusions that were passed at previous town meetings. Things like the Twin School and the North Acton Fire Station. And then CPA specifically needs to be used for community housing, historic preservation, open space, and outdoor recreation. So the town is faced with budgets A and B this year, as are the schools. The FY24 operating budget is at the top, and then the two possible budgets. Budget A would be voted on at town meeting if the override passes, and budget B would be voted on at town meeting if the override does not pass. Same thing with the Acton-Boxborough Regional School District. I don't know what you're showing me. They also have an A and B budget, and again, budget A would be presented at town meeting if the override passes, budget B if it does not pass. This is a list of the budget drivers that both entities have given us and are what they say are driving these cost increases. You can see them all here. Again, this was made to be something that kind of is self-contained, so I'm not going to read every word on every slide, and I'm happy to send this out to anybody, and it's available on our website. So at the time of publication of this document, Budget A would reduce 7 currently open positions in the town, and Budget B would reduce those positions as well as staff in the fire, police, library, and town clerk's office. And then there would need to be some cuts to capital investments, special events, and elimination of funding for services and supplies that the departments use to deliver services to the residents. And on the school side, Budget A reduces roughly 25 FTEs and increase all-day kindergarten tuition, athletic, activity, and parking fees. Budget B would reduce further. It would reduce 86 FTEs. Then we'd be shifting about 180 to 220 elementary students to consolidate with other schools, and there would be further increases to all-day kindergarten tuition, athletic, activity, and parking fees. So what in general is an operational override? It is a vote to allow the town to raise the tax levy by a dollar amount that exceeds 2.5% plus new growth. So right now, that is what can be taxed without any special permission from the taxpayers beyond agreeing to the budgets. And so this would be an exception to that and raise the base tax levy dollar amount above 2.5% plus new growth. And I will note this is an authorization to spend above 2.5%. It is not an appropriation to spend above 2.5%. That part is done when the budgets are passed. So there will be a meeting, there will be an election, on Tuesday, April 30th, and a ballot vote on the operational override, which requires a simple majority. Whether it passes or fails, there is a meeting on May 6th. It is Acton Town Meeting, and votes will be required on the budget for the town and schools with a simple majority. And then there will be a meeting the following week at Boxborough to do the same. So residents' concerns obviously include the impact on property taxes. Budget A requires an operational override vote allowing the town to tax up to $6.6 million. Currently, Budget A uses $5.4 million of that, and the average tax bill increase for FY25 would be roughly $1,200. The rest of that money, the rest of the 6.6 approved would remain in reserve as an untaxed levy capacity for possible use in future years. Budget B represents a typical 2.5% plus new growth, and the average tax bill increase would be $462, which is in line with the average for the last 5 years. So that's basics of the process without going into anything beyond the mechanics of the situation that we are currently in. And again, anybody who gets this document in the appendix, there is a primer on what makes up your tax bill, which I'll just pop through real quick. And and free cash statement, as well as the Minuteman budget.
This presentation was finalized before, was agreed to before all the numbers were finalized, so some of the budget numbers are off, but not by very much.
Okay.
That's it. And now I will do a relatively quick presentation of the point of view. Once I need you to let me in. The override presentation covered a fair amount of what we talk about in here. Normally this presentation is given before the budgets have been decided on and is given to, thank you, the school committee and the select board, and part of the trying to guide them towards what we think is a sustainable budget for taxpayers. But because we're doing this at a different time, I'm going to speak to it a little differently than we normally would. Okay, wonderful. High-level overview. Spending is going to outpace revenues for this year, as we've seen, even more so than we were kind of originally expecting going into this year. We also see it for years coming out. There are no turnbacks projected for fiscal year 24. That is not entirely unexpected, but different from our previous years. There is an expensive 5-year forecast for capital projects. We have some things that need to happen that will unfortunately cost a lot of money. And at the same time, the town's residents are hitting multiple things that are making it harder to keep paying all the bills. So, long story short, we think now is exactly when an operational override is needed. And, Christine nicely explained the process, and I'll just get a little into some different reasons why we think it has to happen now. I'm going to skim over this Prop 2.5 thing, especially seeing people here who know what it is. Super high level, the amount that the town can increase taxes every year without having to get an override is 2.5% on the previous year's budget plus growth, how much the town has changed. We've stayed pretty well ahead of that for a long time. There are other sources of revenue. State aid has stayed stable. Local receipts are up a little. And our debt exclusion has actually dropped some because debt exclusion is a wonderful type of override where the taxes go away after you're done paying for the thing. So you might take a big jump like we did with the Boardwalk campus when you decide to build a new school, but when that's done, the town doesn't get to keep asking you for that money. They can ask you to spend that money on something different, but it's not a permanent type of override, unlike the operating override that we're talking about right now. Here, we're going to talk about projections for revenue and spending for both budgets A and B. Unfortunately, it's been pointed out that we haven't done the best job explaining what budgets A and B are. Budget A is the budget with the override. This is a budget that is dependent on the override passing at the ballot box in order to have enough money. That's why you see there's a nice big jump between fiscal year 24 and the budget for fiscal year 25 on the yellow line. But if you look at the 2 years going out, fiscal years 26 and 27, those numbers are in a range that is typically able to get worked out within the ALG process. So if anyone's looking at that and feeling nervous that the next few years, why are they projected to have the shortfalls, it's not actually something to worry about. That's within a range of decisions that can be made prioritizing various spending through that process. One sec. Budget B is the budget we're going into if nothing passes. It's important to know the town and the schools have to have a balanced budget. So this is them cutting back on everything they can. I'll get more into why there need to be cutbacks for there, but this budget B, in order to match up with revenues, will require a cut in service. And if you look at years further out, the second we hit fiscal year 26, we're already in trouble. $2 million is a hard gap for ALG to close, and things only get worse from there. So if the override doesn't pass this year, we will need to pass one soon. If you most likely have not been paying a lot of attention to how this all works in terms of overrides, overrides need to happen periodically. The Prop 2.5 plus growth, 2.5% plus growth, could hold up as long as inflation stays low and no new services are added. The population doesn't grow in any way that requires new things both at the school and the town level. But the fact of the matter is that we have, as voters at town meeting, approved new services, new projects, all for the right reasons, but now it's time to kind of level everything back up to get to pay for it. Part of the challenge here, hold on, back to budget A, and what we're seeing this year is that we have a number of fixed expenses that we have no control over. These are Minuteman assessment. That's the assessment from us being sending children to the Minuteman Regional Vocational Technical High School. The Middlesex Retirement Assessment, which is an assessment we pay as a part of a retirement program for town employees. And Health Insurance Trust. Health Insurance Trust is a big push for why we absolutely needed the override somewhat suddenly this year. There was a huge increase, huge number of claims that made the town and schools, which are part of the health insurance trust, suddenly short of money to cover the claims that were coming in. No one could have foreseen this. And unfortunately, in response to that, they also were required to raise rates more or less immediately. The town and schools have figured out ways within their current budgets to pay for this. Fingers crossed there might be a little bit of wiggle that needs to happen for the town to do a last minute movement of some money at town meeting, but hopefully that will not happen. What you can see from looking at this, however, is that those green area, that's what the town has some ability, and the schools have some ability to change. Actually, those contain a fair amount of fixed expenses too. We have a number of contracts for various employees and other things that aren't very movable. So within this kind of ever-shrinking green area is what the town and schools have to work with for doing different things. If you look at the B budget, those green squares or bars are even smaller, making it even harder for them. And you'll notice that next year, if we have to stay within Prop 2.5, there is a decrease in the available money outside of fixed costs for the town and schools to run on. It's only after that that we start to get back up, but that's still 1.5% is not a level to keep up with salary, basic cost of living requirements, inflation just around school and office supplies. So as I said, an override needs to happen. It might not be this year. If it's not this year, that will be a problem for the town and the schools, but it does absolutely need to happen if we're going to keep operating the services in the schools at the levels that we are proud of. In order to stay healthy, the Finance Committee has recommended to the town, based on state guidance, that there is a free cash floor of 3% and a ceiling at 5%. This is of total spending the town has. The reason this matters to you all is free cash is money we have on hand if something happens that is unexpectedly an emergency, and it's an indication to anyone who loans us money that we are in good financial position to absorb problems that happen. This was extremely helpful when we went to buy the big twin school. We got a very, very good rate. We continue to maintain that healthy rate, and it is of great value to the town for future large projects, which unfortunately we have some coming, to stay above that 3% floor. The school, their effective free cash is called E&D, excess and deficiency. The school has been unable to maintain a 3% floor. They've unfortunately had to spend some operating expenses, cover some operating expenses with money out of E&D. At this point, they have chosen, and we wholeheartedly support the idea of not spending any E&D for this year, not planning to spend it, in the next year's budget, not planning to spend it at least for a while going forward because it has dropped, by their estimation, far too low. There's also a stabilization fund that the town has, and the school actually has one for their SIP projects. Those are capital improvement projects. And there are other types of reserves that the towns has that we really think it's important for those to maintain at stable levels. Our recommendation, however, to make things easier on the taxpayers is to spend the high free cash level we have down to the 3% floor for fiscal year 25. This will smooth out some of the burden that taxpayers have. I'll get a little more into how we balance that out and still manage to maintain the savings that we need. And as we said, our recommendation to the schools and their use is to, and their plan is to use no E&D coming up. They need to get that E&D number higher. This is a mix of potential projects from the SIP, the capital improvement plan that the town has put forward. Looks about 10 years out. This is not the final list that was even presented to the select board for choosing from. This is just a list of projects that could have been done. Some of these have been selected. And if you look at the presentation the town manager made, the final budget presentation to the select board, you can see what the final choices were. What was chosen by the select board is based on their priorities. That is what the guidance is. These things all need to happen eventually. These are just indications in the SIP by when they might happen, but it is a very fluid document. What we really are trying to show here is there's a lot of stuff coming that needs to be done. And the entities who come up with the budgets need to keep in mind everything, how it affects the taxpayers. Here we're going to look at the excluded debt for anyone who doesn't know what that is. That is the payments I was talking about earlier. When we do a big borrowing, it can only be for a capital project. And the debt payments, once that loan is done, go away from your taxes. Unlike operating budget, which the Prop 2.5 increases then go on top of, debt exclusion projects go away. We've actually had a few of those lately. In fiscal year 24, we stopped paying for the Parker Damon School building. And the North Acton, is that the right color? I'm sorry, and the Acton Public Schools borrowing. If you look at fiscal year 29, we will stop having to pay for the junior high and senior high updates that we borrowed for a while back, which you might recall if you've been paying attention to it long enough, gets us back down to the level that we were before the Boardwalk campus was built. Unfortunately, there is a large project coming. That is this lovely salmon color. The DPW is in sore need of an update, and it's going to be a sizable project to complete it. So again, for the planning on the part of the entities in terms of looking at any big projects they want to do or any expansions or prioritization of services, they need to keep in mind that there is this other large debt exclusion project that will come and hit people's tax bills. So our recommendation based on all of that is to limit taking on new excluded debt. There was discussion of adding sidewalks. We think that while sidewalks are an important safety feature, there are other things that people need to have the money in their wallets for at this point in time. We also would like there to be strict attention paid to the DPW project and any features, building it to both last as long as it possibly can for us and really only include the things it needs to. We have a standard thing on the bottom here that we've kept in, even though it's not happening, which is we do not recommend going for an operating override. This is directed towards the schools and the select board. Going for an operating override is the same year as debt exclusion override. But that's not happening, so that is not something that needs to be worried about. Quick overview on residents' tax bills. If you've been paying your bills, you realize that they've been going up every year. That's what happens. It's been about a $498 average per year. There are various reasons why those numbers don't entirely, percentage increases line up with that, but it's nothing you need to worry about right now. And as you see with the B budget, as Christine mentioned, would bring in about that same level. Again, this year, thoughts we specifically want the taxing entities to consider, which is that even though inflation is largely theoretically under control, I don't feel like it is when I go grocery shopping, but the government says inflation is back down. There's still a lot of things hitting everyone, including wage growth has not necessarily kept up with it. And for people in our town, the water treatment is currently, there are plans by the water district to build new filtration systems for the PFAS to deal with it. That will cost people more, and there are sewer treatment facility repairs on the horizon, so anyone in the sewer districts will also have to expect increases in those bills. This is just looking again at the basics of the B budget. Non-override revenue increases of $3 million, but with fixed cost increases of $4.7 million gives a projected available spending increase of negative dollars. This is without there being an override, without the use of free cash, et cetera. But that shows you kind of the bind we're in and why an override of some size really is necessary. And as I said, if we don't do it this year, we're just looking to do it the next year out. In order to not get to this point or to push out how The town and the schools have worked to avoid getting here as much as they can. In the past 2 years, they have cut 40 school admin, district admin, leadership. The assistants have been cut from classrooms. The town has delayed backfilling open positions. They have delayed ongoing maintenance and some capital improvements, and there has been an overall reduction in general expenditures across both entities. If anyone thinks this has come on suddenly or there hasn't been anything done, the town and the school have been working diligently to avoid getting to this problem. And unfortunately, as I said, it was coming, but with the big bills we talked about earlier, it just hit us a lot faster than we expected. So we do, as the Finance Committee, support an operational override of $6.6 million in addition to other cost-saving measures. This would be $5.4 million used in the first year, fiscal year 25, and the rest of the money could be used to spread out the necessary tax increase over time so that the town and the schools still get what they need now, but with the use of free cash and other things, we can shift the burden a little onto the taxpayers to spread out over a few years, but with the town and schools getting the money they need right away. We also, in order to avoid having to have an override anytime soon, recommend strongly that there is a task force created to identify cost savings measures. The town has and school have had these in the past, and they've been highly effective. In conclusion, an operational override is required to support vital town and school services at this point in time. There is going to be a significant change to the town and the schools that we love and strongly support if one does not happen this year. If one does not happen this year, we're still going to need to go for one next year or the year after or the year after that. It's not, I'm sorry, it's going to have to be next year. I say that we have not discussed it as a committee, but I wholeheartedly believe that the numbers we've seen say that. We also need to recognize that inflation, healthcare, insurance, et cetera, are all high for everyone who pays taxes. So we can't have to be frugal, but I think I hope we've demonstrated the town and the schools have been working on that in the last few years. We also need to analyze all current and future spending for necessity and sustainability. I hope that's obvious to everyone, and I hope that any of the boards who have any input into the budgets take that to heart and do a very public process with that, especially by having a task force of stakeholders convened who can both understand what this is, what has happened, and ensure everyone that we're doing everything we can to fix this going forward. One more. I'm going to say one more thing, even though it's not on the slide. Having looked through all of this, I actually think that overrides are a good thing. I know you'll hear complaints about Prop 2.5 being an unreasonable number, but an override forces a town periodically to sit down and before its taxpayers and everyone to talk about what we're doing at this point in time and whether it aligns with our beliefs and it aligns with what we can afford in our wallets. It sort of forces a public review of current expenses. It's very easy to add services and other things. It's real hard to take them away. An override is a time that we can actually be forced to sit down and do that together. So it's a little backwards. It would be great to do that before we had the override, but the timing this year didn't work out that way. So I strongly encourage everyone that if the override gets passed, which I think we all need it to do, that is a next step, that we have that strong, important discussion so that we can go forward in a direction that we all both agree with and can afford. That's it. Do we have any questions? All right. Thank you very much. Yes, Tara, come and say who you are.
Very helpful, by the way, thank you. I've been wondering about a lot of things. You answered several of my questions. On the capital list that's not for or is for, under the FY25, I noticed that the Hayward Light 1.8 million was still on the list.
That's what I was trying to say. That is from the old
version. Okay.
Version. It's not.
Okay. Thank you.
That's not part of the. If you look at the I can't bring it up quickly. You look at the manager's presentation of the final budget before this.
I saw that, and it wasn't in there. So
And yes, it's only the items on that list.
Thank you so much.
Anyone else? Yeah, come on. Please say your name and your address.
Brewster Conant, 562 Main Street. I have a couple of quick questions. Wouldn't it be a little bit more strategic to ask for 5.4 as opposed to 6.6? It seems like there are a lot of people that are concerned about, their taxes going up, and if you don't need it right away, I know it's making perhaps a buffer so you can do it the next time, but why don't we do it each year and try and get better things than that? The other question I had was has to do with the B budget. The B budget doesn't work out over time. And I'm not sure why that happens, since I thought the B budget was supposed to be what happens when we try and balance it without an override. So it makes me wonder, is it because enough cuts weren't made in the thing that as you extrapolate into future years, that it doesn't, that it then doesn't work out? I mean, sort of like, does the school need to cut another, I don't know. Is it one or two more people that need to be cut, or is it intractable, or there seems to be some discretionary type of spending? So just curious on that one, why the B budget isn't able to work.
Do you mean the total B budget or
Yeah.
the town B budget specifically? I unfortunately don't remember enough of the details of the school budget. Please go ahead.
So you're talking about the graph,
Yeah,
right?
the graph
that shows that the deficit actually gets bigger.
Yeah, it makes it look
right.
like it's a worse, it does, that A
right.
is better because it doesn't have problems, but its B may not be
Yes.
happening because it didn't start off right.
Right, so let's say that next year I take $10,000 out of your salary.
Yeah.
And you readjust your budget. And the next year, I'm gonna take $15,000 out of your budget. And the following year, I'm gonna take $20,000 out of your budget. So those adjustments down will need to be made every year because our fixed expenses are growing at greater than 3%. Our fixed expenses that like health insurance and Middlesex and Minuteman have been growing at greater than, and everything in the budget, just like everything that you buy, has grown at greater than 3%. And so they would just have to be cut after cut after cut after cut, which means service cuts in the end.
Okay, so are you saying there's no discretionary room at all?
We've been cutting the discretionary room
And there's
2 years in a row.
None left? Is that, I'm just trying to figure out where's the play?
That's what happens in the ALG process, right? There's back and forth, where can we find cuts and where can we get in line with revenue? Those cuts would be deeper and deeper and deeper every year. There's the amount of budget that can be flexed in one way or another is actually about 25% of that green area.
Okay.
Because the rest of it is taken up by contracts and other things
No,
that
I
are out of our
understand. I
control.
understand fixed costs, but,
Yeah.
we're all dealing with our own, we don't go on vacation, we don't buy the new car, we don't do all sorts of stuff, right?
Yep.
So just trying to figure out. So there is 25%, but the idea was not to try and grab any of that to make sure that that just goes out, okay?
Actually, if I may add, both this year and last year in this presentation, we did have a section that specifically called out what is available for use for quote-unquote new initiatives, and it has become vanishingly small over the last couple of years. So there is very little that can be considered to be discretionary at this point, especially considering on the town side, they've already postponed hiring for a couple of years, and on the school side, they've already been firing people. They've been having layoffs. This would be the third year of layoffs. So finding any more in this budget, I think, is going to be very difficult to do. I can speak for myself and for Christy as part of the ALG process. We already cut out quite a bit from what was originally asked. The original ask at the beginning of the year was 12 million. To your point about why would it be better to go for an override of 5.4 over 6.6, I'm actually somewhat sympathetic to that argument. there was what I refer to as a chicken and egg problem. We kept being told we had to give a revenue limit to the taxing entities, and the taxing entities, we kept asking for the updated budgets. And so when it looked like time was going to run out, we kind of blinked first and gave them a number, and are there actually quite happy that they did not come back and ask for the full 6.6 million in the first fiscal year. I think there was an opportunity to knock down that 6.6 number down to something smaller, but I was not willing to ask for it because I do respect the LG process, where once you say that you've committed to something, that you've committed to it. I also believe that having some amount of excess levy capacity for the next couple of years will be a wise thing to do. There is an ongoing bet between a couple of members of the Finance Committee as to which override is more likely to fail, the first one that happens after 15 years or the second one to happen only after 2 or 3. And so there is some value in potentially not having to come back and do this again in just a year or 2. Also, I think part of the reason we were able to get to the budget numbers that we were able to get to this year is because we were not demanding a permanent cut down to the 5.4 service levels by having the ability to come back with a little bit of an easier time in FY26. We were able to have some things get put on hold and not get fully cut. So I believe this was not as smooth and as easy as I think anybody would like this to be, but I believe this is the best outcome that we could have possibly hoped to get to in this year.
Okay, well, I thank you for that good explanation there. If you've done it in the past, I guess you probably should recommend to do it again and show how little room you have, right? Because then that could be more persuasive than me coming up here and seeing a lot of green there, and I don't know how much of that is available or not. And I wouldn't mind asking another question, but if there's anybody else who would like to ask a question first.
Please go ahead.
Okay. One of the other narratives that you hear, and I don't know how valid it is that, you know, the school, the budgets for the schools wag the dog, and that there seems to be somewhat of a disproportionate amount of money spent, you know, for that. And when you say disproportionate, then the question is, what is it disproportionate to? What's the expected here? You didn't show it up here, but in your graphs, you actually have several tables about how we are relative to the other communities. And how much we spend on, you know, taxes per year and stuff like that. I think it'd be instructive to show how much we spend on schools as a percentage compared to all our neighbors. I mean, Concord's the only one that seems to be a little bit more than we are, but it would be instructive for people to say, oh, okay, no, oh, geez, you know, we're right in the middle of the pack, or geez, we're so far out and ahead that, you know, maybe that's why we have the best schools. But I think that would be information that would be useful for people to see. Whether or not you add 2 more columns to say what the total budget is, because then you're trying to normalize things, you don't have some of the other stuff. But it seems like at least, you know, because you had your discussion this last time about this is how much of the budget goes, 63-point-something%, but only 28-point-something is, you know, our school-age children. That's a loaded type of thing there, but it's those things that people are going to try and make a comparison to. So, well, that seems like a big ratio, or, you know, a ratio that you don't like, but maybe it's the same as what's in the other towns. I don't know. Be useful. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. That's a good point. Could you please hit the microphone? Just one thing I'd like to direct you towards, if you look at the information from the school's budget Saturday, they have a chart, they have a few slides showing charts of where we fall, where the school district falls on spending on various categories. And one of the key takeaways is we spend less per pupil than most school districts out there and are very high performing. So we could at least feel proud about that.
That's good to know. Yes, thank you. Okay, I've gone through your stuff. I haven't gone through all the AV stuff. Thank you.
It's a lot
to go through.
But that has it. The budget Saturday workshop has it.
That'd be good. Thank you.
Okay, seeing no one else, we'll move on to the next agenda item, which is a budget hearing. Mr. Mangiarotti, will you join us for this, please?
Good evening. John Mangiarotti, Town Manager. Nice to see you all. So this budget hearing is something that I've attended the last few years, and it's just an opportunity for the Finance Committee and the public to ask any questions that you all have about the budget that's been approved by the Select Board for transmittal to this body. And then from here, you would make your recommendation to town meeting and the voters. So I can walk through, although you did a pretty good job of it a few minutes ago, the budget and just where we're at and how we ended up with the A budget. Would you like me to do that?
Certainly. If this is the slideshow you presented on February 26th, I can put that up for you.
Okay. Or I can just talk through it.
Okay, please talk.
So I think one thing that was unique about this budget process, and you alluded to it a little bit in your previous discussions, is the amount of presentations and iterations and really helpful feedback that we received throughout the several months that we've been working on this, starting in early November, having public meetings with the Select Board, the Finance Committee, the Acton Leadership Group, and we really had a lot of feedback and input on ways that we could adjust the budgets to meet the needs of the community and the financial constraints that we're working within. The level services budget was presented in November, and it was a number that was something that required more revenue than we had available, and we were asked to make adjustments. We did that, and leading up to several presentations that we made over the last few months, culminating on a final presentation of the A and B budgets. The A budget being a budget that accounts for additional revenue from an override, and a B budget that does not. And those were presented to the Select Board on February 26th. We implemented several cost-saving measures in this budget to be able to deliver budget numbers that, even with an override, represented significant changes to what we consider to be level services this year. We reduced staffing in many departments. As mentioned, some of those positions were unfilled, but it doesn't mean that they were unimportant. So those are things that we've changed in this budget. We also introduced some new offsets. We were able to get support from the Finance Committee and the Select Board and our auditors and even the rating agencies that, using some of our OPEB trust, although it's scary to think about, they think it's not that bad of an idea since this community has done such a great job of building it up, and we have a very good head start on paying off our liability. And so being able to thoughtfully use some of that to offset the more than $1 million a year we spend on retiree health insurance made sense. So we have a new offset proposed that's for $300,000 to offset the cost of our health insurance payments next year. We're also, the Cemetery Commission agreed to fund $50,000 from their trust towards the cemetery operations. So those are some creative steps that we took this year to help close the gap with the finances needed to deliver services next year. We also, as we do every year, refined estimates, found other ways to pay for things, used grants, found external funding sources to be able to present budgets that fall within the targets that the Select Board and the ALG and the Finance Committee were asking for. So the municipal operations budget is $38,993,663. We're proposing $350,000 worth of offsets, which I just described. We're proposing $540,000 of subsidies towards our enterprise funds. These are funds that are needed to help those enterprise operations such as ambulance and transportation, which do receive revenue, but have relied for many years and will need to continue to rely until things change from an annual subsidy to keep those programs running. So in total, the operations would be $39,183,663. As mentioned, we had a very extensive capital improvement plan that we need to be able to maintain our infrastructure. Every year, as we make decisions on how to balance the budget, capital is the first place we go. And so as a result, there are projects that we propose every year as things that we need to do. But when it comes down to it, if we can't find a grant, it ends up getting either kicked to next year or the year after, or it continues to happen. So that happened again this year, but I do think the projects that we proposed represent some important investments, and hopefully we can continue to find ways to address more projects in the future. But we're proposing borrowing with a net impact of $564,000 in debt service. That's based on a 5% borrowing rate. Hopefully we'll do better than that, but we're not really interested in planning for better than that right now. We also are proposing just over $1 million in free cash projects, and those are projects that we pay with our reserves that have been set aside to help with capital costs like this. And those are projects from equipment replacement to sidewalk and road work, all required to keep our operations going each year. So in total, the spending for FY25 is proposed at $40,772,801. A little more detail on the capital projects. So we're proposing 4 projects to be paid for through borrowing. The first is the fueling station at the DPW. That's a fueling station that's used by all of our town vehicles, including highway and public works, police, fire. But it's also used by the school district, and additionally, it's used by Case Transportation. So any day, there's dozens of vehicles that get fueled up there. Case has over 100 vehicles, for example. So that's something that's reached its end of life. And although we have plans to replace the DPW facility in its entirety, it was felt very strongly that this fuel replacement project needs to happen first. It's been designed in a way that it actually takes the fuel depot from where it is right now, which is basically the center of the entire site, and puts it off to the side, which would be better for circulation. It would also be better for future plans to do something else on the site because it gets it out of the way. So it's deemed a good first step towards improving that infrastructure over there. That's a $2.6 million project. We are working with both the school district and Case to have them contribute towards that cost, but we're budgeting for the entire amount here and the debt service associated with it. The second project is the aerial ladder truck for the fire station. Ours is a 2009. We need to replace it. It's something that goes in for repairs more than we'd like it to. It takes 3 years to get it, which I still can't believe, but if town meeting said yes on May 6th and we put the order in, we wouldn't see it for 3 years. So we need to get started on that replacement because that's a critical piece, particularly with the the taller buildings that we have now and the buildings that are set further back from the street. It's an important tool that our team uses. And then there's $1.2 million in complete streets projects proposed for borrowing. Primarily, that would be replacing the intersection at Prospect and Main with a safer circulation and a safer intersection layout, better for pedestrians, bicyclists, and vehicles. Also, some improvements to Great Road, which is a high priority need. I think it's the number 1 or number 2 select board priority this year was to make improvements to Great Road. And then the third item is stormwater. The rain that we've all seen this winter reminds us how important our infrastructure is to keep water going where it's supposed to go. And that is something that we need to make some major investments in over the next 10 years. And we need to start next year. So those are the borrowing projects. The free cash projects are traffic calming intersections, replacing the SCBA equipment, self-contained breathing apparatus, which is the units that the firefighter EMTs wear to keep them safe when they're in fires. We also are replacing equipment with the police department, their cruisers. We're addressing the facility study priorities that were identified in the study that we completed recently, doing a cyclical data collection project, which we're required to do by the Massachusetts Department of Revenue every 10 years, and ours is due next year. And then there's funding for the community event that we have been holding on July 4th, and we're bringing back this year. And so this would be funding to fund it the following year, because we need to fund it a year in advance, because we can't wait till May to know whether or not we have the funding for July 4th, because we have to secure all the vendors already this time of year. So those are the capital projects, and I'm happy to answer any questions about the details. I did provide, and it actually is published on the webpage as well, a updated version of the budget. The budget that we published on in December represented the level services budget, and as I mentioned, we changed that several times through the budget process. We've now uploaded a detailed operational budget showing how it's changed, so that if you wanted to know any particular department, that information is now available. We also produced the Finance Committee's favorite document, the 26-liner, and that's been updated as well for your reference. I know that you're comfortable with that, so we're keeping it going. We changed the name of it, though. Sorry, I think it's called the year-to-year expense report or something like that. Yeah, so we changed it a little bit, but the spirit is there. So thank you for all your help. You all, as shown in that presentation, you all put a lot into what we've been trying to do here, and I appreciate your support throughout this budget process. So thanks.
Thank you. Does anyone have any questions?
Thanks, John. I have actually I have the year-to-year, the 34-liner, and you know it shows the salaries in aggregate going up 1.7% in the FY25 budget. Does that sound good? I think that was the number that was up there.
I looked at that too. I think that's overtime.
Oh, okay. It looked like the overtime line was a bit higher, at least on this version.
Oh yeah, no, you're right. Yep, it's 1.71. And that's the result of several positions being cut.
Okay.
So salaries are going up, but because we're eliminating positions,
yeah, the 1.7 is there.
The delta there, yeah.
Do you know what it is on a per FTE basis in aggregate? So if you like subtracted 5 positions, for example, the number would be 1.7, but is it on an FTE basis, you know, 4 or 5?
Generally, the employees that both union and non-union are on a step-based system. And in addition to that, there's also cost of living increases that occur throughout annual basis based on collective bargaining. And that is usually 3 to 4% in total between the two. In some cases more, depending on the collective bargaining results.
Is that a reasonable number? I know this is crystal ball, but like looking forward to FY26, that sort of range? On FTE per FTE basis?
Yeah, that's the target that we need to work with. I mean, as we know, our revenue doesn't go up much more than that, so to continue to have salaries go up more than that is not sustainable. So we do our best to keep it around that range.
And then maybe just one more is, you know, what % of town employees are covered by CBAs? Yeah, you know that offhand or just rough numbers?
Yes, so all of fire, all of police and dispatch, all of public works are in the union, 90%. And then everyone in this building is non-union. So percentage-wise, Mary Ann probably knows.
As John mentioned, those 5 bargaining units, probably a 65, 35, 70, 30 split.
I got you. Okay, appreciate it. Thank you.
I should clarify, the 65, 70 is the unions? Okay.
John, in the past, I know the National Fire Protection Association has guidelines for firefighters per 1,000 population, and the FBI has standards for police per 1,000 population. Now, historically, I know we've never exceeded those numbers, and at times we've been below them. But if the B budget came to pass, just how far below the recommendations of those 2 organizations would we be in terms of public safety employees?
Thank you for the question. I think both the police chief and the fire chief requested additional positions this year, not necessarily directly related to those standards, but mostly to improve our supervision and the work that to ensure better operational outcomes with both departments. And we had to say no, or I guess I had to say no to both of those requests, but I blamed you.
And we have broad shoulders, John. We can take it. There's 9 of us.
No, so I think, you know, the impact shift that would be impacted by not having the override pass is something that I think is a way to add staffing rather than, usually when you hire 4 firefighters, you have to hire 4. In this case, we're adding 2 and having them work a different schedule to supplement how things go. I think we will need to look at staffing for the fire department. Having 4 stations really has spread them out, and it's impacted the way we do things. And so I think we need to look at that operationally. It doesn't necessarily mean that we need to add staffing, but we need to maybe redeploy staffing and look at different positions. For the police department, the B budget would impact our clinician. It would reduce our clinician funding, and that's an area of policing that I think we're doing very well in, and I hate to see us take a step backwards because that's an essential part of providing police services these days, is having that follow-up, the social work component, and we've had a great response from the program since we've started it, and we're hoping to continue building that. So it's not as much of an issue of standards from my perspective as it is services, and it would be an impact to those services that I think are very important.
Thank you.
I just wanted to say thank you. I feel like, you know, since you came to town, you've done a really great job of going after other funds, going after other funding sources, going after grant money, going after, you know, whatever you can to help us continue to provide services and offset some of the costs as, you know, costs have grown. So, you know, you've done it again this year, and it just seems to be one of your strengths, and I really appreciate that you focus on that. Considering the circumstances, it's a great budget, and I appreciate the transparency and everything that you've done. Thanks.
Thank you. Appreciate that.
One of the things that the Finance Committee talked about at our last meeting is we're now operating in not entirely an information vacuum, but certainly without a local weekly newspaper. So a whole lot of the work that you've put in, or we've put in, or a lot of the critical decisions that have been made over the last several months have gone underreported. One of the surprises we found, however, was the number of people who visit the town's website. It seems that if you can't read the news in the Beacon, you go to the website. So I'm wondering, have you noticed that? Have you seen an uptick in traffic or visits over the last couple of years?
Oh, that's an interesting question. We do track that a little bit, and we do know that traffic on the website spikes depending on when things are happening. It certainly spikes around July 4th because people are saying, how do I get to the fireworks? And so we see a huge spike that day. It spikes closer to town meeting when people are trying to figure out things. But other than that, we haven't noticed a trend related to the newspapers all going out of business.
Well, one of the things we saw was there was an increase in the number of people looking for marriage licenses, and there was also an increase in the number of people coming to the town website looking for food pantry information.
Great, thank you.
Anyone else?
Thanks, John. I know this was not a fun budget year to, excuse me, to go through this, but I guess some consolation is we're not the only town dealing with this stuff like this right now with budget overrides. I know Westford, where you live, Concord, Carlisle, So there was another one, I forgot off the top of my head, Andover. So we're not alone in this type of endeavor right now. So, but I think it's, echo Christine, you've been doing a great job, and I do appreciate that.
As I said, thank you. I think actually part of the difficulty we might have in convincing people of the override is that you have done a very good job not showing people how much you've had to cut and compress things over the last few years. The ship is running very smoothly, and it has been, unfortunately, less than obvious, in this circumstance, less than obvious the amount of work you've had to do. So thank you very much for doing that, and I'll only really me a tiny bit if you make it look like things are going too well and the override doesn't pass.
Well,
I believe now it's time for us to vote on the budget. Are we comfortable doing that? Blank stares is not helpful, people. Steve?
We'll move we approve the budget as transmitted.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Thank you. All in favor say aye.
Aye. Aye.
Opposed, nay. Abstentions? All right. Thank you very much. Yes, John.
first of all, thank you for your support and the vote, but I just wanted to mention that with some nice things were said about how we're doing things, and I think we work very hard. It's a team that we have here, some of the Marianne and Ellie and other people that are here. We have a really good team here in this building and in this organization, and we try to fly under the radar. And so that's part of what we do. So we'll try to do better going forward. But thank you for saying that, and I'll pass on the word to everybody that your compliments.
All right, next up we have a discussion of the special town meeting. If you haven't all heard, there is going to be one on April 17th at the high school. That's the middle of vacation week at 7 p.m. It is about a single item that Tara is here to talk about.
Hello, thank you so much for having us. Now Jane is not feeling well, and so she's asked me to do her part, and I'm going to try, and I don't know her part, but she said, can you at least do the proposal? So she's proposing that the MBTA, to see if you would support the MBTA zoning article to be amended to be 50% affordable at 50% AMI. Now, I can't tell you what she would say to try and convince you, but I can tell you that I would support that because for a number of reasons. First of all, the housing production plan says that's the most critical need. The MBTA zoning intent of the law is to address the housing crisis, not to flood the market with million-dollar condos to make executives easier to find executives' houses. It is to address the housing crisis. The housing crisis is not, as I will say later, a quantity problem. It is a pricing problem. So I believe that that would stand up in court, and I don't even think we'll go to court. I think we're going to find out a lot in the next couple months. So that's her part, my best attempt at her part of the speech. So now I'll move on to mine, unless you have any questions about her proposal that I will attempt to answer. Thank you. All right, so I am here to talk about the town's zoning plans to allow thousands of additional market rate condos, 10 or 25 per acre. The town has not said how many thousands. They say that it will not happen right away. However, Avalon representatives told me not too long ago that they have no capacity limits and the market will buy whatever they build in Acton. You're the FinCom, and unless I ask, I won't go into my biggest fear with MBTA zoning, which is the increased displacement risk for Dover Heights and South Acton tenants. In total, I believe that over 100 modest income families would be at risk of displacement if these zoning articles pass and their landlords can make millions by evicting them. So unless you ask about tenant displacement risk, I'll focus here on topics you've talked about and asked about in the past of me. First, water. Is there enough water in the aquifer for the doubling or tripling the build-out, the remaining build-out? When water capacity stops, new building stops. Is there enough water capacity for community goals, desired commercial uses, affordable housing, or expanding houses to accommodate aging family? If we wait on the zoning articles till the fall, we'll know more about how required MBTA zoning actually is, how required. We'll know what other towns are doing and how the Milton case is playing out, We'll know more about water capacity. We'll know more about whether Milton is defending its right. Oh, we already know Milton is defending its right to say no to MBTA zoning on constitutional grounds, if the news is right. Out of 6 towns that have brought MBTA zoning to a vote, 1 has declared outright they would not do it. 2 have failed at town meeting. The AG's MBTA zoning suit against Milton is the only suit against a town. Read it. It seems flimsy. It asks for authority it does not have. If the AG had the authority to punish Milton, it would not be asking the courts for authority. Courts cannot give the AG authority the authority does not already have. I'll quote from the case. The Attorney General brings this action to obtain declaratory, injunctive, and other relief against the town of Milton, because it does not have the authority. MBTA housing is not a public emergency. The state is already building more condos than it needs, including serving immigrants, 3 times the natural birth rate. The housing crisis will not be solved by more million-dollar condos. It would just spark gentrification and worsen displacement and affordability. The meager percentage of affordability baked into MBTA zoning will not prevent tenant displacement. This is a crisis of pricing, not quantity. The state wants more condos because it gets new tax revenue without having to build schools or hire more people at town hall. On stormwater and drinking water infrastructure, currently developers are responsible for paying for additional infrastructure. For example, Acton Water District has declared they will not pay for the extra infrastructure required to service the Powder Mill Place affordable housing project. That's why the developer has not started building. Further, it looks like the same legislators who pushed for MBTA zoning are now pushing to require towns to pay for such infrastructure. Either way, this will not help existing tenants. Around the country, proponents of zoning change pay for impact studies so the governing body can determine whether to grant zoning relief. In this case, the town is the proponent. By all measurable standards, they should submit impact studies to Acton Water District and to the voters. Somerville planners proposed similar zoning a couple years ago. They examined impacts of various build-out scenarios. These included what percentage of the new tax revenues would be expected to come from commercial versus residential based on recent market trends in Somerville. These studies are not hard to do based on square footage calculations and are super cheap compared to the potential cost of the zoning. The Powder Mill study that MAPC did was not a tax impact study. It was a market study based on their trying to subsidize rents of commercial buildings via zoning relief. We can't help serve people more if taxes from new building don't pay for the new services we need. Who will pay for the stormwater infrastructure to accommodate thousands of new condos in South Acton, an area already prone to flooding? Developers didn't pay for the stormwater infrastructure we need now. That cost has been pushed to the taxpayer. Will we need to build another school to accommodate thousands of additional condos? We seem to be working within existing school capacity. What about a year from now if each of the huge developers has submitted applications for 300 units each? Do we decide significant change with a wave of the arm to our questions? Or do we insist on impact studies before significant zoning proposals are put on the warrant? How do we help protect people if we do not know the impact of our vote? Having the override plus 3 massive zoning proposals which are not accompanied by fiscal and water impact studies is too much to bear. Please urge the Select Board to perform impact studies before putting such significant zoning articles on the warrant. Please urge the Select Board to wait until the fall so we'll know more about the costs of saying no or yes, more about whether it will actually help or harm people. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions?
When will the final wording for these articles be available?
So it's a non-binding resolution, and, the zoning articles, I believe that they're either done or they've had a hearing. I don't know if they're allowed to change them, but.
No, I mean the articles for the special town meeting.
It's already done, it's a petition. It's this one sentence that says.
Do you have it on you, or?
I don't actually, I thought you guys had it.
I have it.
No, and it's not on the website.
It's, we urge town leaders before recommending any major zoning proposal to perform and release for public review detailed impact studies which examine the maximum impact of such a proposed zoning proposal.
And for the record, I didn't ask this, but I've been asking for these impact studies for over a year. I've been asking how many units, what's the impact on water? The Acton Water District says we don't know, we need to know how many units. We ask how many units again. The staff says, well, that would be too hard to figure out. The planning board has now asked a month ago asked for the number of units, and then the answer still didn't come. So I believe we're now going to get number of units now that we submitted the petition, because that's kind of how it works sometimes. But you know, if I had gotten the information, I wouldn't. I mean, I'd be here doing something else, but.
Do you have a template of what you're looking to receive?
Yes.
This is a one-line
Correct.
article. So, go ahead.
So I can tell you what I personally would like to receive, and the officials, you, the select board, can tailor that to choose, you know, some things or not other things, but at the very minimum, we should know the number of units. We should know, you know, what percentage based on historical build rates of the zoning build-out would be from commercial versus residential. If Somerville can figure it out, we can figure it out.
So you have a written template that you're prepared to deliver to the town manager and other people, so that we can
Sure.
see what the level of effort that you're looking for
Well,
would be?
Okay, at the minimum, I think it can be free. I could do these studies if you just tell me how many units. But if you want to engage in a real impact study, you know, it costs 30 grand, you know, for 6 weeks or something like that to actually conduct, you know, a market study of just the tenant displacement risk and stuff like that.
So is that what you're requesting? That for
No.
every, so before you go to town meeting
Yes.
and have a town meeting asking for a specific output, asking for a specific result,
Well,
I would
can
very
ask-
much like to see the template of what you're looking for.
Got it. You know, if I could make that real easy so that everybody will vote yes, but I would rather hear what you would support in terms of the detail so that I could make up a spec that you'd support. So do you care about tenant displacement risk? Do you need to see those calculations? I did one on 13 Railroad. There's 4 units on an acre of land. That would be $10 million condos effectively. So would Fenton just, you know, evict those tenants and destroy the building so you can build $1 million condos? You know, your guess is as good as mine, but at least I know that the economic incentive is to exist. Historic buildings, do we care about the economic incentive to reduce historic buildings to rubble so that they can build $1 million condos? These are the types of things that I would do, but I'm not, you guys, I'm not in charge. I can only suggest, is that important enough for you to add $3,000 into the impact study to do that part of it? A water impact study, that should be separate, and that should be done by water experts, I think. Although a quick, cheap way, again, would be to say how many bedrooms, you know, what type of units, and this stuff can all be done based on history. It can be worst case. Worst case is probably easier than what the probability is, because the Avalons and the Toll Brothers are like minimum 100-unit projects, and they're looking for 300-unit projects. And there's 2 of them that are sniffing around, and there's got to be at least 2 or 3 more other of their friends that'll come around as soon as the ink dries. So my question to you is, what impact studies would you support? And I'm writing right now. Do you want to know the impact, the number of units? Would that be helpful to know about school, water? Is this something that you guys would like?
So as you know, we had hoped to do something similar to this year at the very beginning of the year before we got overrun by an override. We had we had asked to start amongst ourselves trying to come up with some kind of rough estimate for what new growth would cost. Obviously that got thrown out this year because of an override. I think you would be better served to have a clear, rather than come to us and ask what you're looking for. I struggle with this. I believe you're probably on the right path, but by not having a template, by not knowing exact, because this, what you presented with us is a wide open thing.
Oh, I see.
You know, as you say, if all you want to know is the number of units, they can send you an email on that, and then there's no further investigation that needs to be done.
Got it.
Or the town manager can come back and say, for every single one of these studies, it's going to cost $30,000 with it, or $50,000 for an outside consultant to run a 3-month study.
Got it.
I absolutely cannot sign on to an amendment to an article that is that undefined. Thank you.
Got it. Okay.
So please don't have one line
Got it.
article without having a template that you actively want to share with us.
Fair enough. Now, can I ask my ask then would be to put me on the next agenda so I can come back with a proposal, and y'all can cut, we don't like that, that's going to be too much. I'll estimate prices, and some of this stuff can be done in-house. For example, if they give us the number of units max and number of bedrooms max, or likely, or whatever it is, we can translate that into water pretty fast. I don't know about school capacity, but I'll bet you there's somebody on this FinCom that can tell whether that's going to be able to be accommodated by the existing buildings and what the FTEs would be. We also, if you guys can get me, when I was a select board member way back, I got a 5-year or 10-year FTE per population estimate. Actually, it was historicals. And if we had that was updated, the last one I got was like 2010, we could actually do FTE, probable FTE impact based on historicals. In terms of tenant risk, I can probably do that myself, but you guys want to pay for it, go for it. I could submit it, and then you guys could, staff could, criticize it or whatever. But this is the type of work that I feel is really important, so I thank you for. So that's a yes, you'll put me on the agenda for. Thank you. Sir.
Tara, have you had a chance to look at all of the zoning bylaws for the MBTA
Yes.
in South Acton Village?
Start to finish.
Presented at the
yes.
planning board on the 19th?
Yep.
Okay.
They are primarily design oriented, so setbacks, number of, what's allowed in terms of the number of acres. So I could go parcel by parcel and figure it out, but Kristen has now agreed to use the state's calculator.
Right.
Which will give us a good estimate, a good enough estimate, I think.
Which will give you the full overview,
Yeah,
the total number of units.
Right.
Yeah, because
right.
that's easily available. That's always
because I think that what I'd like to do is do like a maximum scenario. So like, what if all these Toll Brothers and all their friends show up, and what could happen in 1 year? Then look at the kind of natural market growth and say, is this probable? I don't know, but either way, a couple of scenarios. Yeah. So, all right, did I answer your question?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Yeah, I was only asking to find out if you were able to summate the total number of units based on those items, but it sounds like you'd have to do it manually. I can do that manually, yeah.
But
the GIS
would
system
you
they
trust
have
my
downstairs.
Yeah, I'd be in there like going like this all over the GIS, but would
Yeah.
you then trust it? I'd rather have the town do it. And so Kristen has now said she can do that with the calculator, so.
Wonderful.
Hopefully we'll get that.
Thank you.
Anything else?
I think, as Jason said, come back with specific things.
Yeah, we'll do.
That you think should be a part of it.
How much money would you support? So I can fit.
It depends what you're talking about.
A bunch of impact studies, 50 grand, 20 grand, 30 grand.
I think it's a question of bring back what you think is important, and we can discuss the details.
The more you pay, the more accurate it gets. So if you want a quick and easy, it's not as good. If you...
I don't know about everyone else here. I don't understand. I don't have any background in impact studies to know what those would usually consist of.
They run from like 3-4 grand up to like 30 grand.
I mean, what sort of information? Adam?
I think the cautionary tale is here is that you're speaking to a group of people that generally think financially, and when we're thinking of an impact study, we want to know what the long-term prorated, financial impact is down the road. That's as far as we generally think, and you're thinking from a much broader point of view, which includes a lot more socioeconomic issues that we may not even know to ask. And so I think that's to Jason's point. If you don't define exactly what you want and why you want it, then even if you get it approved that there would be an impact study, somebody else will decide for you what's going to be in that impact study. So it's better if you define it yourself.
So if, for example, water impact study, stormwater impact study, to translate that into why a FinCom might care about that item. So tenant displacement, why do you care? Geez, more social workers, I don't know. But there's an impact on all these items. Fiscally, I tend to think about like, housing is a right, and then I think, how do I get that cheapest?
Yeah, for us, our charter is to give financial perspective.
Got it.
On this. So I think Adam sums up well.
Keep reminding me of that. Thank you.
Yeah, and one more topic on that specific subject, which is that regardless of what an impact study returns, I think it would be not unsafe to say that it's not going to show a reason to not comply with the MBTA laws, given how quickly the state has kind of cracked down on the towns that initially balked at it. So if the purpose of wanting the impact study is so that you can say we don't want to do this, then that's probably money not well spent. But some of your socioeconomic questions could be money well spent because it could help craft either these zoning articles or future zoning articles that might impact the things that concern you about socioeconomic housing.
Like how much capacity of water is left, and are we going to have that to do what we want to do in the master plan?
The wording for the special town meeting is very broad, which I appreciate personally because we do need to have planning at this level for water, sewage, et cetera. So not just focusing out on the MBTA, which the town meeting does not, I think will be helpful for everyone.
Right, so I believe that we shouldn't vote on these zoning articles till we have impact studies. I don't think they can be done in 3 weeks or 4 weeks. I hope that we wait till the fall, so we'll see more what happens with these towns, because there's been 3 that have said no, and the AG is not suing all of them. They're not suing the one that said go to hell. You know, they're only suing the one in Milton where the developers want to build. So, the question, I guess, to you guys, are you willing to take a gamble without any information on a town meeting vote on these 3 zoning articles?
We're not making a decision right now.
I know that. I'm saying it's a rhetorical
I'm sorry,
question.
we actually, in response to that, I would like to invite Mr. Mangiarotti up, who has some details from us about the risk of monies we might lose, and also has somewhere else he has to be. So
and I would like to come back and talk about these grants, because it's my view that the grants that we wouldn't have gotten, first of all, there's no guarantee we get any grants in the future.
How about we talk about them at the next meeting that you come to?
Okay, and I'll send you a thing, because I believe that the grants have all been for developers. So anyways, thank you.
Thank you for sticking around, John.
Hi, thank you. So the article that you're discussing is to do impact studies, and I've actually started to do an impact study of my own. It's the impact on this organization and this community if we don't comply with MBTA's mandate. A lot of the things that was just said by the previous speaker are not accurate with regards to what other communities are doing, the impacts from other communities, and particularly about the grants that we would lose out on if we're not compliant. It's true, some of the grants that we've received are to help support infrastructure for important community initiatives like affordable housing, which happen to be built by developers. But within the last 3 years, we've received $1.83 million from the MVP program to do climate action planning, to work on several initiatives related to sustainability and projects and programs that we wouldn't be able to fund with the constraints that we're within. We have a dam in South Acton that was a major hazard to our residents in South Acton. We didn't have $2.4 million to do that. We fortunately were able to get support from town meeting for just over $1 million, but through the dam and seawall grant, we received $1.4 million to help get that project completed. One of the things that's interesting about the town of Milton is that they had a dam and seawall grant too to help with some kind of dam in their town, and the state just took it away from them. They hadn't used it yet, and they said, okay, we're taking that back. So and that's just a very specific example, but as you know, and as was mentioned earlier, we've been bringing in, through the hard work of everyone in this organization, millions of dollars a year, every year, to help offset the local investments that local taxpayers are paying to do things. And that's a big reason why the capital improvement plan, which is showing in the near $100 million, it looks like it's daunting, but I'm confident that we will continue to chip away at that, both with capital investment from the community, but also through external funding from grants. And going out and saying that an issue that the state is focusing on to reduce one barrier for housing and saying that we don't want to even pursue that and we're not interested is going to really have an impact on our community in terms of how we fund projects, programs, and services. So I can do a more detailed impact study on that for you if you'd like, but I just wanted to make sure that to raise that issue. Some of you already knew that, but I just wanted to raise it with everyone else so that that's something we're all aware of. Thank you.
Can I just ask, it's a question that's come up I don't have an answer to. What is the cost of a special town meeting?
Thank you. We have to hire the staffing to run it. We have to hire election workers to run it. We have to do all the work that goes into it. Staff time, people are on salary, they're here anyways, but it's taking away from work that they need to be doing for the other town meeting and everything else. Postage is $2,000 to $3,000. Printing, we probably can do in-house. That night, it's probably another couple $1,000s with all the expenses that come into it. So I know in the past we've said 10,000 more for a town meeting, but that includes all the AV and all the stuff that we usually do. I don't anticipate doing that for this meeting, so it wouldn't be as expensive, but it's certainly a significant effort for staff to take this on in the middle of other things that we're doing, but we're happy to do it. That's what we're here for, and we will continue to do things like that when we're asked.
Thanks, John. Just in general to that point, you know, an extra town meeting is costing us money. A legal fight would cost us dearly. We're looking at a budget issue. Right now, we're trying to solve budget issues going forward. So any movement on this article would have to be a movement that showed that not doing it would cost us more than doing it in the end, if you want the Finance Committee's attention. And that's a high bar.
This conversation has a dangerous ability to shift to just being about the MBTA zoning, which is not the wording of the citizens petition.
That was the entire presentation I just heard.
Yes,
so I was just responding to it.
I'm sorry, I appreciate that, and I did shut her down to some degree. What is the required timing for the MBTA zoning? There's a request that it be pushed off to the fall. Is that a possibility, or are we up against the wall?
I can get that specific answer for you, but I do know that a significant community engagement effort has been started in March of 2022 with this timeline in mind, and everyone involved has been aware of that, and I think this isn't a surprise that we're bringing this forward.
Thank you. I am going to, in my position, as much power as I have, insist that our discussion going forward is about broadly impact studies. We are not having a special town meeting from the FinCom's perspective on the MBTA zoning. That is something that will be discussed at the big town meeting.
Okay. I was just going to say that those grants, the MBPA.
We're not, that's about the MBTA zoning.
No, it was about grants. And
grants only come up because of the MBTA zoning.
Oh, I see. So we're not going to talk about
We're going to
grants.
talk about the importance of impact studies and whether sufficient impact studies are being done for large zoning.
Thank you. Well, when will we talk about, will you put something, a separate agenda item on about whether to have these zoning articles on the warrant?
When those are given to us having been on the warrant, we will discuss them at that time.
So when they're proposed to be on the warrant?
When we get a draft warrant.
Got it.
With articles in it.
Thank you.
We don't talk about articles before they've been written. Okay. Next up, ALG. We're somewhat early in the wind down part of ALG and the little bit of keep our fingers crossed that we don't have to scramble to figure out how to come up with another override for next year. The schools say the expenses are running well. They are at 0, as opposed to being negative, which is great. We'll take it. Looking for something happy here. Because of the large unexpected expenses around special ed that are hitting circuit breaker, the state has opened up a grant program to help schools try to refill their circuit breaker fund sum. The school district has applied for $500,000 of that. And actually are currently $200,000 ahead of where they expected to be on revenue right now. The town has sped up its doing end-of-year reviews just to make sure that everything fits within the budgets of money that's available. Also found out that most recently, they were seeing a 2.27% rate as potential for some borrowing. So things could be looking up for the projects. Yes.
2.77%.
2.77. Ah,
Close.
It looks like 2. Can we take that to the bank?
No.
In the fiscal year 25 budgets, the school committee voted on the final budget, which includes increasing fees, pre-K tuition, all-day K tuition, parking, athletics fees, and adding activities fees in. The town at this point is working on warrant articles and thinking about the grants that would be at risk if the MBTA zoning articles do not pass. And I recommended that we keep the ALG process chugging along more than it normally would past this point in preparation for any difficulties. If there is an override, it's going to take some if there's not an override, it's going to take some logistics, but clearly we'll have to keep things going a little ahead. And the only remaining item is for us to agree on, we have agreed on the ALG model as it will be presented in the warrant. There's a lot of discussion about going forward, what percentages to plug in for growth in the out years, whether it should be a 3%, this is what we need to work within, or a 3.75%, this is what it realistically takes, and then how do we close it? So that will be a discussion for another day, ongoing. And we actually have the warrant going to print in the middle of April, I believe. So we have to start thinking about warrant articles. Speaking of which, I believe Jason is going to take the special town meeting warrant article, unless you'd like it, Adam, since it is related to planning. I can help you with it. Okay, wonderful. Thank you very much. Okay, if that's it, we'll get back to public education. I think Jason was hoping to line up some places for us to talk.
All that's done so far is this school committee meeting on April 4th that you and I are going to present at. But that's the point of view. As for the rest of the invites, I don't have any feedback to give you.
We have no minutes to review tonight. Do you have any liaison reports? Greg.
The Economic Development Committee added a new member. His name is, I think, David Cote. He's associated with the Children's Museum. So he's now a full member. And for some bizarre reason, because I'm the liaison, they want to make me an associate member. So I haven't filled out any paperwork yet, but is that normal?
I have no idea.
Neither did I. So I haven't filled out any paperwork yet.
I believe you should just be able, it's like a FinCom slot that you should just be able to slide into, and then next year it could be someone else. Okay. I'll find out more for you. Please. Anyone else? Adam?
I just want to make the comment that I won't be available for the special town meeting. And I'm looking at the MBTA zoning compliance, and it looks like December 31st of this year is the deadline for the application, the district compliance application, which would include that the zoning was approved at town meeting, which is why the committee wants these presented as articles this town meeting. So I guess potentially it could be put off to the fall, but that's getting awfully close to the deadline. Yeah. And another special town meeting and the cost of that.
Okay. Our next meeting date is April 9th. Give me a thumbs up if you can be there. All right, we've got quorum. Wonderful. And we will be discussing the special town meeting article again at that point in time. Any other?
Sorry, I have a conflict on April 9th.
Okay. So if you could just work with Jason before then, would be helpful. Or after, frankly. Okay? Don't think we have anything else before. Okay, Greg, please make a motion.
I move we adjourn.
We have a second. All right, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. All right, thank you.